If your walls could talk, would they warn you? They are made of something else. They are made of memory. These houses hold on to the past. They remember the people who lived inside their walls. They remember the joy. They remember the laughter. But they also remember the sorrow. And sometimes, they remember the fear. These memories don't fade. They linger in the air like a faint perfume. They whisper from the shadows in the corner of your eye. You can feel them in the sudden cold draft on a warm summer night. These are the places we call haunted. They are everywhere. An old farmhouse in the quiet countryside. A modern apartment in a busy city. Even the house next door. The stories from these places are not just tales told around a campfire. They are whispers from the past, trying to tell us something. They are a reminder that some things, once they happen, never truly go away. They just wait. They wait for someone new to move in. They wait for someone to listen to their story. Listen. Tonight, I want to share some of these stories with you. There are 13 of them. Each one is a glimpse into a house that remembers. These are tales that people have shared. Quiet, trembling. They are stories of ordinary homes where something extraordinary and unsettling happened. They are about the feeling of not being alone, even when you are the only one there. These stories are a journey into the heart of what makes a house a home, and what happens when that home holds on to something dark and refuses to let go. I invite you to come closer, to listen carefully, but I must give you a warning. These stories might change the way you see your own home. They might make you listen a little more closely to the creaks and groans of your house at night. They might make you wonder about the history of the ground beneath your feet, because every house has a story. The question is, do you really want to know what it is? The walls are always listening, and sometimes they decide to talk back. Before we begin, I want you to do something for me. Sit back and get comfortable. Maybe dim the lights a little. Let the world outside fade away. I want you to imagine a sound. It's a very low, steady hum, almost too quiet to notice at first. A sound like an old refrigerator in the next room, the distant thrum of a power line. Let that sound be the floor for our stories tonight. It's the sound of a house breathing, the sound of tension building, slowly and surely. You might even forget it's there. But it will be, always. Each of the 13 stories starts with a simple hook, a single sentence to pull you in. It's the key turning in the lock of a door you probably shouldn't open. From there, we will walk through these homes together. We will see what the people who lived there saw. We will hear what they heard. We will feel the chill they felt on the back of their necks. We will build the scene, piece by piece, until the air itself feels heavy with suspense and quiet dread. But be prepared. Every story has an end, and these endings are not gentle. At the very moment you feel the most suspense, when you are holding your breath, there will be a jump, a sudden, sharp moment designed to make your heart leap. It might be a sound, a sight, or a sudden, shocking realization. Imagine a sharp, loud musical sting, a sudden crash of sound that breaks the quiet hum. 13 stories, 13 hooks to draw you in, and 13 jumps to make you look over your shoulder. So, the question is simple. Are you ready? Are you sure you are sitting in that room by yourself? Take a look around. Listen to the sounds of your own home. The gentle tick of a clock, the sigh of the wind outside your window, the quiet creak of the floorboards upstairs. Is it just the house settling, or is it something else? Let's find out together. The first house is waiting for us. The door is unlocked. Let's step inside. The old rocking chair was a gift, but it never stopped moving on its own. This was in autumn of 1982, in a small house in rural Vermont. A young couple had just moved in. Mark, Sarah. The house was old, but it had character. The previous owner, an elderly woman, had left some of her furniture behind. Among the items was a beautiful, dark wood rocking chair. It sat in the corner of their living room, by the large window that looked out onto the woods. At first, they loved it. It was a piece of history, a connection to the home's past. But soon, they started to notice something strange. It would move. They would come home from work to find it in a slightly different position. Sometimes it was turned towards the window, as if someone had been sitting there, watching the trees. Other times, it faced the center of the room, as if waiting for company. Mark blamed drafts. He said the old house had uneven floors. Sarah wasn't so sure. She started to feel a presence in the room, a quiet and watchful energy centered on that chair. One evening, while reading on the sofa, she saw it happen with her own eyes. The chair began to rock, slowly and rhythmically, with a soft, gentle creak. The rocking became a regular occurrence. It always happened at night, usually around the same time. The steady creak, creak, creak would echo through the night. It wasn't loud or aggressive, but it was unnerving. It felt like someone was there with them, a silent roommate they could never see. Sarah tried to ignore it, to treat it like the house's own heartbeat. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger each day. She would wake up in the middle of the night with a deep sense of unease, convinced that someone was sitting in that chair, rocking back and forth in the darkness, just looking at their bedroom door. One night, Mark was working late. Sarah was alone, trying to watch television, but the sound of the rocking chair was too distracting. The creak, creak, was constant.
Stop it. Please, just stop.
The rocking stopped. The house fell completely silent. A wave of relief washed over her. She took a deep, shaky breath and turned back to the television. A moment later, she heard a soft, dry whisper right behind her ear. No. My grandmother kept a photo album that had one picture she would never talk about. It was a thick, heavy book with a worn leather cover filled with black and white pictures. As a kid, I loved looking through it. Family picnics, holidays, school days. But there was one picture tucked near the back that always gave me a strange feeling. It showed my grandmother and her sister as young girls standing in front of their old two-story house. They were smiling and holding hands, but they weren't alone. In the upstairs window behind them was a small child, a pale face, dark eyes staring out. Whenever I asked my grandmother who the child was, she would get quiet. Her smile would fade. She would simply turn the page.
It's no one.
Just a trick of the light. But it wasn't a trick of the light. The face was too clear. It was a little boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with dark, messy hair. He wasn't smiling. He watched from the window with a sad, lost expression. I asked my great-aunt about it once, and she just shivered. She told me to never ask about the boy in the window again. The house, she said, had memories it was best to leave undisturbed. Years passed. My grandmother grew older, and I eventually inherited the photo album. The picture was still there, the boy's face still staring out from the window. One day, I was doing some family history research online and found an old newspaper article from the town where my grandmother grew up. It was from 1946. The article reported a tragic accident. A young boy named Thomas had fallen from an upstairs window of a house on my grandmother's street. He had died instantly. The address of the house matched the one in the photograph. The boy, Thomas, had lived there. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This was the boy. He wasn't a relative or a friend. He was a ghost, trapped in the place where he died, his image captured by the camera on that sunny afternoon. I looked back at the photograph, at the pale face in the window. He looked so lonely. I felt a strange mix of sadness and fear. The story was finally solved. I closed the album and put it on the coffee table, feeling a sense of closure. As I turned to leave the room, I glanced at the album one last time. It was open again to that same page, but this time, the boy in the window was waving at me. The door to the basement in our new house would always be open in the morning. We bought the house in Chicago in the winter of 2005. It was a fixer-upper, a 3-bedroom bungalow, with a lot of potential, and a full, unfinished basement. The basement was damp and dark, with stone walls. A single bare light bulb hung from a wire. The door sat at the end of the kitchen hallway, a heavy, solid wood door with a sturdy latch. Every night before bed, I made sure it was closed and latched, a habit part of checking the locks. But every morning, without fail, it would be open. My wife Jenny thought I was forgetful. "You probably just think you closed it," she'd say, pouring her coffee. But I knew I wasn't. I was meticulous. I'd tell her each night, "The basement door is latched." Still, the next morning it stood wide open, the dark stairs revealed. There was no logical explanation. We didn't have pets. The house was secure. The latch was strong. It couldn't just pop open. It felt like a silent invitation. Something, or someone, wanted us to go down. Cold air always rose from the basement. The feeling in the house began to change. What had been excitement about a new home became a quiet dread. We avoided the kitchen hallway after dark. We heard faint noises from below, scrapes, soft thuds, like something was being dragged across the concrete floor. One night I tried to prove I wasn't crazy. I wedged a heavy kitchen chair under the doorknob after latching it. "There," I said to Jenny. "Let's see it open now." We went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. I listened for sounds from the kitchen all night. The next morning I woke early and went to the kitchen. My heart pounded. As I turned the corner into the hallway, I saw it. The chair was still wedged under the doorknob. The heavy wooden door was shut. The latch was firmly in place. I sighed with relief. I felt silly, maybe imagining things. I walked up to move the chair and start the day. Then I saw a thin line of light at the bottom. Someone had turned the basement light on from the inside. Ever since we bought the antique mirror, I started seeing a second reflection in it. My partner, Alex, found it at a flea market in New Orleans last year, around May 2023. It was a large, beautiful piece, with an ornate, tarnished silver frame. We hung it on the wall in our bedroom, opposite the foot of our bed. It made the room feel bigger and brighter. For the first few weeks, it was just a mirror. But then I started noticing things. It would happen late at night, when I was reading in bed, and Alex was asleep. I would glance up at the mirror and see a flicker of movement behind my own reflection. At first, I dismissed it as my eyes playing tricks on me. A shadow, a reflection of a car's headlights from the street outside. But it kept happening. The movement became clearer. It looked like a figure, a tall, thin shape, standing just behind my reflected self in the mirror's world. It was always in the background, slightly out of focus, like a person standing at the far end of the room. It never moved much, just stood there, motionless. I never saw its face clearly, just a dark outline of a head and shoulders. I tried to tell Alex about it, but he couldn't see it. He'd look in the mirror and just see the room.
"You're just tired."
The feeling of being watched became constant. I started to hate the mirror. I would try to avoid looking at it, but it was so large and directly in my line of sight from the bed. I felt like I had an audience every night. The figure in the mirror started to feel more present, more real. One night, I swear I saw it raise a hand, very slowly. I was so scared I started sleeping with my back to it, but that was almost worse. I could feel its gaze on me all night long.
"It's a beautiful antique. We're not getting rid of it."
Last night was the worst yet. I woke up around 3 a.m. to a feeling of intense cold. The room was freezing. I sat up, my heart hammering in my chest, and I forced myself to look at the mirror. The figure was there, as always, but it wasn't standing in the background anymore. It was right behind my reflection, its dark shape looming over my shoulder. I could almost feel its cold breath on my neck. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to scream or move. I just stared, watching my own terrified face in the glass, with the dark thing right behind me. Then, very slowly, my reflection in the mirror smiled. But I wasn't smiling. The new apartment was perfect, except for the voices that came from the heating vents. My sister Chloe moved into the place in Boston in early 2011. It was a spacious pre-war apartment with high ceilings and beautiful hardwood floors. But it had an old, noisy radiator system with large metal vents in every room. A few days after moving in, she started hearing things. It began as a faint sound, almost like the wind, but it had a human quality. It sounded like whispering. She couldn't make out any words, just the soft, sibilant hissing of people talking quietly. She assumed it was just the neighbors, their voices carrying through the old building's ductwork. The whispers became a constant companion, especially at night when the building was quiet. Chloe would lie in bed and listen to the faint murmuring coming from the vent near her floor. It was always just out of reach of understanding, a frustrating muddle of sounds. Sometimes it sounded like one person, sometimes like several. The tone was never angry or loud. It was conspiratorial, secretive. She started to feel like she was eavesdropping on a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. She checked with her neighbors on either side. Both were elderly and hard of hearing. They swore they never heard a thing and were usually asleep by 9 p.m. Chloe tried to block it out. She played music, ran a white noise machine, even tried stuffing a towel into the vent. But somehow, the sound always found a way through. It seemed to get a little louder, a little more insistent each week. The feeling in the apartment shifted from cozy to unnerving. She felt watched, listened to.
The whispers no longer felt like a distant conversation. They felt like they were about her. One evening, while on the phone with our mother, the whispering started up, louder than ever. "What is that noise? It sounds like someone is in the room with you."
Chloe's blood ran cold. It wasn't just in her head. Frustrated and scared, she finally had enough. One night, as the murmuring filled her silent bedroom, she knelt down by the vent. She pressed her ear against the cold metal grill, determined to understand what was being said. The sound was clearer now, closer. It was a man. It was a woman, their voices dry and raspy. She held her breath, concentrating.
For the first time, she could make out a few words through the static hiss. She heard the woman's voice clearly say a single word, "Chloe." Then the man's voice replied, just as clearly, "She's listening."
The small handprint appeared on the inside of the window every single morning. This happened in a small cottage my parents rented for a summer vacation in Maine back in 1995. The cottage was right on the coast, a charming but isolated place surrounded by thick fog most mornings. The handprint was on the large picture window in the living room that overlooked the sea. It was the print of a small child's hand, clear and distinct against the glass. The first time my mom saw it, she assumed it was mine or my brother's. She cleaned it off with some glass cleaner and a paper towel, scolding us for putting our dirty hands on the clean window. The next morning, the handprint was back. It was in the exact same spot, the same size, the same perfect little print. My mom cleaned it off again, this time watching us carefully all day. We weren't allowed anywhere near that window. But the following morning, there it was again, a perfect little handprint, pressed against the glass from the inside. This became a daily ritual. My mom would wipe away the print, and the next day it would return. It was baffling. We were the only ones in the cottage. There were no other children around for miles. And the print was always on the inside, as if a small child was standing there each night, looking out at the dark, foggy sea. My dad, ever the skeptic, tried to find a rational explanation. He thought it was some kind of chemical reaction, an oil spot on the glass that kept reappearing with the condensation from the fog. To prove it, he cleaned the window himself using a special solvent, scrubbing until the glass was perfectly, chemically clean. He stood back, proud of his work.
Let's see the little ghost come back now.
That night, a thick fog rolled in, blanketing the cottage completely. The next morning, my dad woke up first. He went straight to the living room window, confident that his experiment had worked. I followed him, curious to see. He stopped in the doorway and just stood there, completely silent. The window was covered in condensation, but it was clear his solvent had worked. The single handprint was gone. A wave of relief washed over me. But then my dad raised a trembling finger and pointed at the glass. The fog had left a message. In place of the single print, the entire surface of the window was now covered with them. Dozens and dozens of tiny handprints, all over the glass, on top of each other. And in the middle, scrawled in the condensation, was one word: help. My daughter told me her new friend, Lily, lived in the walls of our house. We had just moved into an older Victorian home in San Francisco in the summer of 2018. My 6-year-old daughter, Maya, had a hard time adjusting. So when she started talking about a new friend she had made, I was relieved. She said her name was Lily. No, Mommy. Lily lives here, in the walls. She would talk to Lily all the time, holding long, one-sided conversations with an empty corner of her bedroom. It was a bit odd, but I thought it was just a child's imagination coping with a new environment. The game with Lily started to become more elaborate. Maya would leave out snacks for her. She insisted we set an extra place at the dinner table for her friend. Lily is sad. She's looking for her dolly. She says it's in the dark place. A cold feeling washed over me, but I shook it off. It was just a story. Things started to get stranger. I would hear noises from Maya's room at night. Not just Maya talking, but soft thumps and scrapes from inside the walls. It sounded like a mouse, but bigger. One night, I walked past her room and heard 2 distinct voices whispering. I peeked inside. Maya was asleep in her bed, but I could still hear the faint whispering coming from the corner near the closet. It was low and raspy, and it definitely wasn't my daughter's voice. I started to worry that Lily wasn't so imaginary after all. I began researching the history of our house, my hands shaking as I typed the address into the search bar. My research uncovered a newspaper article from the 1890s. It told the story of a family who had lived in the house. They had a young daughter named Lillian who had died from scarlet fever. The article included a faded photograph of the family. There she was, a pale girl with long dark hair wearing a white dress. Lillian, Lily. I felt sick. That night, I went into Maya's room to check on her. She was fast asleep. I decided to open the closet and look at the access panel she had pointed to. Taped to the small wooden door was a drawing Maya had made. It showed two little girls holding hands. One was clearly Maya. The other was a pale girl in a white dress. Underneath, Maya had written, "Me and Lily," and on the other side of the panel, I heard a faint scratching sound. The music box. The porcelain music box would play its song at exactly 3 a.m. every night. It belonged to my husband's grandmother, and was one of the few things he kept after she passed away. We moved to our first house together in Denver in 2020, and he placed it on the mantelpiece in the living room. It was a delicate thing, a ballerina made of porcelain that would slowly turn when you wound it up, playing a tinkling, slightly off-key version of Für Elise. We never touched it. It was more of a memorial piece, a dusty object full of sentimental value for him. For the first few months, it was just that, a silent, still object on the mantel. Then, one night, I woke up for no reason. The house was dark and quiet, but I felt a strange sense of unease. And then I heard it. Faintly, from downstairs came the tinkling notes of Für Elise. It was soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. I looked at the clock on my bedside table. It read 3 a.m. exactly. I woke my husband, David, but by the time he was awake enough to listen, the music had stopped. He told me I must have been dreaming, but it happened again the next night, and the night after that. At precisely 3 a.m., the delicate, haunting melody would drift up the stairs, play for about a minute, and then stop. David finally heard it for himself. We were both woken up by the ghostly tune. He went downstairs to investigate. The living room was empty and cold. The music box was sitting on the mantel, silent. He checked it. The wind-up key on the bottom hadn't been turned. It was impossible for it to play without being wound. Yet we both heard it. The nightly concert began to take a toll on us. Sleep became something we dreaded. We knew that at 3 a.m., we would be awakened by that sad, off-key melody. It felt like a countdown, a nightly appointment we couldn't cancel. David refused to get rid of the music box. It was his grandmother's. He felt it would be disrespectful. Last night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I woke up a few minutes before 3 a.m., my heart pounding with anticipation. I crept out of bed and tiptoed to the top of the stairs, peering down into the dark living room below. I waited. The clock downstairs chimed 3 times, and then the music started. The tinkling notes filled the silence. I watched the music box on the mantel, but it wasn't moving. The ballerina was perfectly still. The sound wasn't coming from the box itself. It sounded like it was coming from all around the room at once. And then I saw a flicker of movement in the darkness near the fireplace. Music cue. A sharp, loud sting. A small, shadowy figure was slowly turning, dancing in a circle to the music. The footsteps on the stairs. The footsteps always stopped at the top of the stairs, right outside my bedroom door. My family moved into a tall, narrow townhouse in Philadelphia in December of 2009. The house was over a century old, with steep, creaky wooden stairs that ran up the center of the building. My bedroom was on the 3rd floor, at the very top. From the first week we lived there, I started hearing the footsteps. They always began on the 1st floor, a slow, heavy tread. It sounded like a man wearing heavy boots, walking deliberately. Thump, thump, thump. Up the 1st flight of stairs. A pause. Then thump, thump, thump. Up the 2nd flight, coming closer. Every night, it was the same. The footsteps would start around midnight. I would lie in my bed, frozen, listening to them make their slow, steady journey up through the house. My parents, whose bedroom was on the 2nd floor, never heard a thing. I tried to tell them, but they said it was just the old house making noises. They said the pipes were knocking or the wood was settling. But this wasn't a creak or a groan. It was a footstep. It had a weight and a rhythm that was undeniably human. I could almost picture the person making it. I imagined a large, tired man, slowly climbing the stairs after a long day. The most terrifying part was the ending. The footsteps would climb the final flight of stairs, each step louder and closer than the last. My heart would pound in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. Thump, 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 right up to the very last step. They would stop directly outside my closed bedroom door. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the sound itself. I would lie there for what felt like hours, staring at the door, waiting for the doorknob to turn, waiting for a knock, waiting for something to happen, but nothing ever did. The presence just stood there, on the other side of the door, waiting in the dark. One night, I couldn't stand the suspense any longer. I was 15 and tired of being scared in my own room. As I heard the footsteps reach the landing just outside, I decided to be brave. I counted to 3, threw back my covers, and ripped the door open. I flicked on the hallway light, ready to confront whoever or whatever was there. The hallway was empty. There was nothing. Just the worn carpet and the faint smell of dust. I felt a strange mix of relief and foolishness. I must have been imagining it. I turned to go back into my room, and my foot brushed against something on the floor. There on the carpet were 2 wet, muddy footprints, right where a person would have been standing. The message on the wall. The strange marks on the nursery wall eventually formed a word. When my wife and I were expecting our first child in 2016, we spent months preparing the nursery. We bought a small house in a quiet suburb of Atlanta. The room was small and bright with a large window. We painted the walls a soft, cheerful yellow. A few weeks before the due date, a mark appeared behind where the crib would go. It was a long, dark smudge like someone had dragged a dirty finger across the fresh paint. I was annoyed, assuming I'd done it by accident while moving furniture. I cleaned it off and repainted the spot. The next day, another mark appeared. I cleaned it and repainted again, and the next day, another one. It became a frustrating, daily battle. A new smudge would appear every morning, always on that same wall. They weren't random. They seemed deliberate. They were short, straight lines and slow curves, like someone was trying to write, but didn't know how. My wife became very distressed. She said the room felt wrong, that there was a sad feeling in there. She didn't want the crib against that wall anymore. To calm her, I agreed we rearranged the whole room and left the wall blank. We hoped the marks would stop appearing. For a while, they did. A week went by with no new smudges. We started to relax, thinking it was over. Our baby girl was born, and we brought her home to the bright, cheerful nursery. The room felt happy again, but on the 3rd night she was home, I went in to check on her. As I stood over her crib, I glanced at the opposite wall. My heart sank. The marks were back, and there were more of them now. A whole cluster of dark lines and curves, almost like letters. I didn't tell my wife. I started getting up early every morning to scrub the wall clean before she could see it. Each day, more marks would appear, slowly connecting, the strange alphabet growing. It was like watching a message being written in slow motion over weeks. Last night, I went into the nursery. The moonlight was streaming through the window, falling directly on that wall. There was a new mark, a final horizontal line connecting 2 of the other shapes. The message was finally complete. The smudged, greasy letters formed a single, shaky word. It was a name I had never heard before. Get out. The face at the window, my new ground floor apartment had a window that looked out onto a solid brick wall. This was in a crowded part of Brooklyn in 2022. The apartment was cheap because of this flaw. The bedroom window, which should have looked out onto a garden or an alley, instead faced the blank brick wall of the building next door. The gap between my window and the wall was less than a foot wide. It was a dark, narrow space, impossible for anyone to get into. The window offered no view, just a sliver of sky if you pressed your face to the glass and looked straight up. It was basically useless, so I kept the blinds closed most of the time. About a month after I moved in, I started feeling like I was being watched. It was a strange, specific feeling, and it only happened when I was in my bedroom. I would be reading or trying to sleep, and I would get the distinct impression that there were eyes on me. I kept telling myself it was impossible. My door was locked. The only window faced a solid brick wall. Nobody could be looking in. Still, the feeling persisted. It grew so strong that I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie in bed, facing away from the window, and feel a cold dread creep up my spine. a certainty that if I turned around, I would see someone standing there. One night, I was working on my laptop in bed. It was late, around 2 a.m. The room was quiet except for the hum of my computer. I had the blinds open just a crack, letting in a tiny bit of the ambient city light. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming tonight, almost suffocating. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my work. Then I heard a sound, a soft tap, tap. It was coming from the window. My whole body went rigid. It couldn't be a branch. There were no trees. It couldn't be the wind. It was a distinct, deliberate tapping sound, coming from the other side of the glass. My fear turned into a strange, cold curiosity. Who could possibly be out there? I had to know. My heart hammering against my ribs, I slowly got out of bed and crept toward the window. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was tired and stressed. I reached the window and stood there for a moment, listening. Silence. I took a deep breath, grabbed the cord for the blinds, and pulled it hard. The blinds shot up with a loud clatter. For a split second, I saw it. Pressed against the other side of the glass, in that impossibly narrow space, was a face. It was pale and gaunt, with wide, dark eyes and a silent, screaming mouth. Then it was gone, leaving only a perfect, fogged-up face print on the glass. The thing in the attic. My brother swore something was living in the attic, and he started leaving food for it. We lived in an old farmhouse in rural Iowa, a house my family had owned since the 1970s. The attic was a dark, dusty space we never went into. The only way up was through a square hatch in the ceiling of the upstairs hallway, and you needed a ladder to reach it. My younger brother, Ben, who was 10 at the time, became obsessed with it in the winter of 2001. He claimed he could hear scratching noises from up there at night, right above his bedroom. My parents told him it was just squirrels or mice seeking shelter from the cold. But Ben was convinced it was something else, something bigger. He started leaving food out for it. At first, it was small things. A piece of bread, an apple slice. In the morning, the food would be gone. My parents thought Ben was just sneaking back to eat it himself, a game he was playing, but he swore he wasn't. It likes apples, but not the bread, he told us seriously one morning. He began leaving a small plate of food there every single night, and every morning, the plate would be empty. The scratching noises continued, but they started to sound different, heavier, more deliberate, like something large was dragging itself across the wooden boards above our heads. One night, I was woken up by a loud thud from the hallway. I crept out of my room and saw Ben standing there, staring up at the attic hatch. The plate he had left out was gone. Not just the food, but the entire ceramic plate. It was hungry, he whispered. He said he heard the hatch creak open, and a long pale arm had reached down and taken the whole plate. I didn't believe him, but I was terrified. The feeling in the house had become heavy and oppressive. We stopped going upstairs alone after dark. The space above us no longer felt empty. It felt occupied by something that was waiting patiently. The next night, Ben took a steak from the fridge before bed. "It needs more," he said. My dad caught him and got angry, telling him this ridiculous game was over. He forbade Ben from leaving any more food out. Ben cried, saying we were going to make it angry. That night, for the first time, there were no scratching sounds. The house was completely, unnervingly silent. Around 3 a.m., we were all woken by an earth-shattering crash from upstairs. We ran into the hallway to see the attic hatch, which had been nailed shut by my dad years ago, completely torn from its frame and lying in pieces on the floor. From the black square of the opening above, something was dripping onto the floorboards. It was thick and dark. And then we heard it begin to crawl down the inside of the wall. There is a man in my house, but he only exists on my security camera. I live alone in a suburban house in Phoenix. This started on May 10th, 2024. I installed a new security system with cameras in the main living areas for peace of mind. The system has an app on my phone, so I can check the live feed anytime. The first few days were normal. I would check the app when I was at work and see my empty living room, my quiet kitchen. Then on the third day, I saw him. I was on my lunch break and opened the app. Standing in the middle of my living room was a man. He was tall and thin, wearing old-fashioned, dark clothes. He was just standing there, staring at the camera. I panicked. I called 911 immediately. The police arrived within minutes. They searched every room, every closet, The garage. They found nothing. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen or disturbed. The officer who spoke to me was kind but skeptical. He suggested it might be a glitch in the system, a digital ghost image. I wanted to believe him. But when I got home that evening, I checked the recorded footage. The man was there for over an hour. He didn't move. Then, at exactly 2:14 p.m., he vanished from one frame to the next. He appears every day now. I check the feed from work, my heart in my throat, and he is there. Sometimes he is in the living room. Sometimes he stands at the kitchen counter. Sometimes he just stands at the bottom of the stairs, looking up. He never moves or interacts with anything. He is just there, a silent, digital phantom in my home. I can't see him with my own eyes. When I am at home, the house feels empty, but I know he is there. The app on my phone is a window into a reality that I cannot see. I feel like I am going insane. I've had the security company check the system twice. They can find nothing wrong with it. Last night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at my phone, watching the live feed from the camera downstairs. He was there, of course, standing at the foot of the stairs, just standing and watching. I watched him for hours, too afraid to move, too afraid to make a sound. It feels like he knows I am watching him through this little screen. I feel like a prisoner in my own bedroom. I am writing this now, at my desk at work, afraid to go home. I just checked the app again a minute ago. The living room is empty. The kitchen is empty. He's not at the bottom of the stairs. I felt a moment of relief, the first in days. Then I switched to the camera I have on the upstairs landing. He is standing right outside my bedroom door. The final stories bring us to a place of absolute dread, where the barrier between the seen and unseen collapses. The thing in the attic is a primal fear, a monster you feed that lives just above your head, a creature with terrifying, physical consequences. It rips through the structure of the home, not a memory or echo, but a living, hungry entity. The Phoenix story is a modern ghost tale, a haunting for the digital age. The ghost isn't in the house, it's in the technology we trust. The camera, meant for security, becomes a window into a horrifying truth: you are not alone. Something unseen is always watching. These accounts are immediate and unresolved. The thing from the attic wasn't captured. It moved into the walls, a permanent, terrifying resident. The man on the camera isn't past tense. He's a current, ongoing reality. The fear isn't a jump scare. It's the certainty the presence remains. The story isn't over. The person is still trapped with their unseen tenant. We traveled from a gentle rocking chair to a creature in the walls. A haunting can evolve from subtle feeling to a direct, physical and technological threat. These final stories are the culmination. The ghosts no longer whisper. They break things. They get closer. They use our technology to announce themselves. They moved from the periphery to the center. They moved from the house's history to the immediate, terrifying present. They've made it clear the house is not yours. This is the ultimate horror. Not just that it contains ghosts, but that you're living in their home, and they can make you aware anytime. As we leave these 13 houses behind, the silence that follows might feel different. The stories are over, but the feeling they leave behind lingers, much like the presences they describe. The journey was designed to slowly peel back the layers of comfort and security we build around ourselves, to make you question the very nature of the space you are in right now. The hum of your refrigerator, the creak of a floorboard upstairs, the flicker of a shadow cast by passing headlights, are they still just ordinary sounds and sights? Or do they now carry a new weight, a new possibility? The most terrifying stories are those that remain unresolved. The thing that crawled into the walls is still there. The man on the security camera is still watching. This lack of closure suggests that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again, and some ghosts will never, ever leave. The purpose of these tales was not just to make you jump. It was to plant a seed of doubt, to make you look at your own four walls with a new sense of wonder, and perhaps a new sense of dread. You close the book, you turn off the screen, and you are left alone in the silence. Listen closely. Are you sure it's just the house settling, or has a new story just begun?